Hi, welcome back to the Iris Prize 2020 podcast. We love everything about queer film, and this year we're all about Best of British. I'm Robert Gershinson, and I'm joined by filmmaker Rosanagh Griffiths. Her film Cindy is shortlisted in the 2020 Iris Prize Best of British, supported by Film 4. The winner gets a post-production package from Pinewood Studios to use on their next film, and all 15 shortlisted films are going to get a wide UK release via Film 4 on all four. So, Rosanagh, when I grow up, I want to be a strong, independent woman in charge of my own body. Not my words, your words. That's quite the opening statement for any character to make in any film. But in this short film, it's a young schoolgirl. So what does a sense of body positivity, how does it play into your work?
I think approaching this film, it was kind of focused on how much anxiety and how much kind of navigation there is for women in the digital age, particularly around kind of, some people are extremely privileged that being able to be queer and open on social media, but still kind of struggling with the kind of sex positivity and body positivity. And I think that it's something that kind of generations coming through are going to be more adapted to, but there is a generation who are kind of still got parents who haven't dealt with this, still got employers who haven't dealt with this. So I kind of wanted to set it up in a way that hopefully the next generation coming through, this is the mantra that they're carrying. And this is the mantra that my generation, I guess, are kind of already there with.
What sort of stuff do they struggle with?
I think it's kind of the intersection of your life in terms of kind of being able to have a life, social life, how that interacts with family, how that interacts with work, having kind of explored some drag myself and that, and also kind of, done naked queers reading and things like that. It's basically my mates run a thing called Naked Boys Reading, which is naked boys reading Freud or naked boys reading Kathy Acker, and sometimes they do naked queers reading, and I've been lucky enough to be asked to read for them twice, which is great.
So you are fully naked,
completely naked
up on
stage.
That stage,
yeah,
just wearing nothing but a smile.
Yeah,
and you're holding a book and you're reading to the crowd.
Yeah, or a piece of paper, which is generally kind of moving quite a lot because I'm quite nervous. Yeah, definitely.
So you're quite nervous when you do it.
I think so. Yeah, I think confidence is this thing that people think that it's like one or the other, but I think there's a kind of I have confidence enough to say yes to doing that, but obviously being up there is kind of thrilling in its own way, but of course it's obviously nerve-wracking.
What were you like in the moment before you step out on stage?
I'm definitely nervous. I've got a tremor in both my hands, so it's kind of it gets triggered by various things like coffee and stuff, but obviously being slightly nervous, it gets worse. So therefore a normal bit of shaking for someone looks like this for me. So yeah, the minutes before I get up there are kind of very nervous, but yeah.
So what pushes you on to go on?
Because I've said yes to it.
You could say no.
I've got a lot of friends in the crowd. It's usually supported by a local East London Film Festival and that. So I've got lots of friends there. I think the last time I did it, I was reading Kathy Acker and there was a projector that someone had forgotten to turn off. And so right on my crutch was apparently brightly lit, more so than the rest of me the entire time. So I had everyone sniggering, but in a really kind of nice way that I was kind of laughing along with them, even though I had no idea what the joke was. So
I was going to say, did you know? I mean, what's the mission of the night? Is it just to breed body positivity?
It's body positivity, but I think it's also a case of around. You tend to kind of really listen to the words more. It's hard to describe, but it's you get swept up into the words because it's so kind of freeing to see somebody where they're putting their kind of body on display. It's hard to describe how much it kind of, I feel like you get a deeper reading into things and stuff. And usually the texts are kind of, you pick the text, but it's around either a theme or a particular writer and that. Yeah.
What sparked the idea for Cindy?
I think I was thinking a lot about this kind of anxiety that comes with the digital age, because I don't know, it's like wanting to be your true self in many ways can be even more difficult to navigate the older you get, in terms of kind of how family will feel about things, how work will feel about things. And so I think I usually get inspired by kind of like an image or a vision or a dream or something like that. And I think I had a dream about about a woman kind of, I think originally I was kind of looking at doing stripping or something like that. And it kind of grew from there, of like a shoe getting kicked into someone's face, spoilers. And I had kind of just gone through a patch where I had really come to understand the importance of chosen family in my own life, because it's not just like the good times of all being able to go out and have a great time, but it was also kind of going through a really, really tough time, and a lot of people just being there for me, even when I wasn't being my best self. So I kind of think I wanted to pay homage to them as in the film as well.
So are those people who are in the film, that's your queer family?
Yeah, most of the extras in the film are kind of my friends, and there's various people kind of scattered throughout and stuff, but I wanted to kind of capture what I think is really special about like kind of having lived in East London for the last kind of 8 years, is like lots of people move to London, whether it be from within the UK or internationally, and that to kind of find themselves, and through that you kind of meet other people who are at the same points, and it just becomes this wonderful kind of support network. And that bleeds out of kind of going to clubs and having a lot of fun there, but also kind of going to film festivals, going to kind of spoken word nights, like kind of doing things that are kind of supporting each other and acknowledging the kind of shared experience that is chosen families. So.
East London does seem to be the sort of the epicenter of queer UK, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people outside of that epicenter who would argue differently, and I think that there's some amazing queer scenes. It can feel quite, I've always felt very lucky living there, because I feel like I just get to walk down the street and be whoever I want, dye my hair whatever color I want, wear whatever I want. I've walked up Stoke Newington High Street at like 9 o'clock in the morning, still out from the night before, dressed as Katie Price with some bad fake tan on, and no one really bats an eyelid, because it's got that kind of community feel. But yeah, no, it's a wonderful place to be queer, and it's going to change a lot in the coming years, I think. And I hope.
In what way?
I think gentrification is already kind of causing huge issues, as it always is, and obviously, being a queer person in East London, you also have to recognise your own part you play in gentrification. But I think everything that's happening at the moment with COVID, the impact that is going to have long term on arts, on venues, we're already losing queer venues left, right and centre in London and around the UK, and this is only going to make it worse for them to survive. So, but I do have faith that the community is strong enough, and we're going through a really good period in terms of queer rights and stuff, that we will be able to hopefully get through this and make something really positive and powerful out of it. So,
what was the writing process like on Cindy? You wrote it yourself?
Yeah, I wrote the first draft of the script in like 3 hours, I think, because I just sat down and it came out, and I went, okay, cool, and then went through the kind of tedious process of editing. It was my first short that I've written, and so I was kind of battling that thing where everybody says, oh, it's great. And I'm like, it could be better. So like trying to kind of go through the editorial process.
So how many drafts did you go through, or what period did you write it?
I think I wrote it in the early part of 2017. Or maybe it was the early part of 2018. And then we went into production in 2019. So it took a while. I think I did maybe about 8 drafts, maybe.
Who was guiding you? I mean, it's great to have friends to say, that's great, go do it, I'm encouraging you, but you need a real person to say, hang on, you know, these dots are not matching up.
Yeah.
So who was that for you?
I had a couple of people. So like one of my best mates, Lucy Stenton, is a script editor, and she does lots of development stuff for TV and film. So she was kind of one of the earlier people who was helping me. Alice Seabright, who's kind of a filmmaker who she's just done a couple of eps of Sex Education as her first kind of thing out of NFTS. She's absolutely brilliant. And she was also very good at being like, you know, when you kind of need somebody who knows their shit but is also incredibly supportive and your biggest champion and kind of like, yeah. And also my producers, Severine and Aeneas from Savannah Films, they're like amazing at kind of hashing out and also very good at, you kind of really knowing that I have a vision for the film and supporting that. So yeah, I find
How did you fund it?
Funding was an interesting one, as I think all shorts are. I had the most ridiculous situation in that my girlfriend and I had our friend come over and she brought her new girlfriend. So the four of us were kind of sitting around having a few drinks, and we decided that we'd do like a read through. And it was really fun, had a great time. And then afterwards, my friend's girlfriend got in contact with me and was like, hey, look, I really loved the film. Like, I really loved the script and I'd love to kind of put some money behind it. And I was like, that like never happened. So, and it's...
How much are we talking?
It was a quarter of the budget in the end, which is amazing to have as kind of a starting point to then be able to go to other people and say, someone else is backing us. Do you want to kind of come on board? So yeah, and then obviously after I had that in place, got involved with Severine and Aeneas, the producers, and they are absolutely brilliant at kind of pulling funding together. And we had amazing support from the film and TV charity through Severine. We were incredibly lucky. And also I work in post-production as my kind of bread and butter, so get to have amazing post-production done, which is very costly for shorts. I think people kind of don't understand what a big impact it can have on the budget. So very lucky for that.
What about crowdfunding?
We did a little bit of crowdfunding, actually. Yeah, I forgot about that. We had amazing crowdfunders who supported us. But I think we ended up having we got about $3,000 through crowdfunding, which I previously crowdfunded a film, and I think that's a kind of sweet spot of getting about 3,000 if you can kind of really put the effort in that. I think we had big dreams of kind of getting a bit more than that, but it's tough work.
Is it like having a full-time job?
It is. It's basically like hustling, like, which obviously like producing and stuff you have to hustle. Like you kind of, you know, making this film, I had so many friends coming as extras and I'm kind of calling everyone all the time. So crowdfunding is like that, but it's also the painful kind of like, please support me as a creative, please, like, and
do you feel guilty, or do you feel like, I don't want to beg?
I don't. I think there's a feeling of guilt, but it's also a case of you don't want to always have to hit up your mum to kind of please put £100 towards this or something. Like I think you can only do crowdfunding so many times. That's what I think. I think it's like you don't want to kind of at the end of the day you want to kind of be chasing funding through other forms. But I do think it's a great thing, and I'm so thankful for everyone who backed it, because it takes £20 from somebody is actually like a lot, and kind of it doesn't seem like much, but when it all adds up it goes really fast. So
what was the casting like?
Casting was actually this was one of my first experiences casting, so I was nervous as all hell. I had an idea of who I wanted Cindy to be, but I wasn't kind of set on anyone, so we did quite a bit of casting. And then I was working on a show called Harlots at the time, like doing post-production for it. And basically I was booked somebody in for an ADR session. Bronwyn came in, she was in the show. She like was an hour late, burst in the door and was like, I'm so sorry. and I just was kind of like, oh my God, she's perfect. Like,
There's Cindy.
Yeah. So it was just like, it was a really lovely thing, because I kind of got in touch with her on the side and was like, sorry to borrow your email address, but I just wanted to send you this script and see if you'd be interested. And she was like, this is absolutely a dream come true to kind of be approached for a project like this, because she is like very involved in queer community herself. She also kind of felt like it reflected some of the conversations she's had to have with her own family and that, and she's just absolutely brilliant. Like, she put in so much work in terms of researching stuff that when she came out for the drag performance that's in the film, I was obviously sitting at the monitor being like, this is kind of a key part of the film. Like, I hope it goes well. We'd done some rehearsals, and she was kind of maybe bringing like like 50%. She's like, don't worry, I'll bring it on the day. And then she just came out and absolutely killed us. Like we were all just at the monitor sitting there like, oh, okay, it's great.
And it's really unusual and it's really great. She's obviously a bigger girl and she is the lead.
Yeah.
She's the lead in this short film. It's unusual for someone like that to be given such an opportunity when the story really isn't about the fact that she is a bigger girl.
Yeah, I think that was when I said I had a mind for what I wanted from Cindy. It wasn't like a set look or it wasn't like a set thing, but I wanted to be able to kind of platform somebody who we don't necessarily see in those roles and not make it about that kind of thing. She's also being a female drag queen, and I really wanted to make sure that wasn't like the contentious point, because I wanted to kind of normalize that, like normalize people of any shapes, sizes, whatever, being able to like impersonate, perform anything, because that's what I feel like happens in my scene to a degree. But then I feel like there's a whole bunch of issues within the queer community and within, body positivity and stuff, of kind of not acknowledging that should be norm and that should be fine. So
you're saying in real life you've noticed that possibly Cindy's story wouldn't happen in the real world?
I think it does happen in the real world for sure, but I think that there is a lot of conversations around things like should women be able to kind of express themselves at whatever shape or size? Should anybody be able to kind of perform drag? Like, I think that was the big thing for me, the female drag queen part of it. It's a very small part that some people might not even notice, and some people might be like, oh, it's a woman doing like a kind of a drag look. But I've definitely known within my own community, it's been a point of contention for like the last kind of 5-10 years and beyond that. My own experience is kind of, because I've done drag as both presenting as male and presenting as female, and kind of played with that, and I've had incidents where I've been at like very respected open like queer nights that people all know about and they love, and having kind of like men come up to me and kind of like question me about the fact that I'm dressed in like female drag and that.
What's the issue?
I don't know. It's kind of, I remember one guy was like kind of half like spat at me and was like, you look like shit and stuff. And it was kind
nice.
of, and I'm like, well, it's a bad taste thing. So of course, I don't know. I think there's a kind of feeling that that is something that you should only be able to perform a gender that's not your own or something. And I think that just totally disregards A, where drag comes from, B, like any kind of ownership over kind of gender performativity. And then obviously icons in the industry like RuPaul and such don't exactly kind of help with the idea that kind of drag is for men, like female drag is for men. So
in the sense that it's always boys that are on the RuPaul's Drag Race. They never invite girls on to come and do it.
There's also the thing about trans, like basically where RuPaul has made comments which basically allude to the fact that like a trans woman, that there are people who go on the show who are trans, but usually they've come out like during the show or after the show, and that it's not something that they actively support in terms of kind of platforming. It's just kind of part of that. But drag, it's a drag race, but drag is very centered on the idea of kind of
man being presenting as woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that what I love about East London queer scene, which obviously has its own problems and issues and stuff, is that there are a lot of people who are kind of very like questioning the idea of questioning the role that biological gender plays in drag. So yeah.
So what's the solution? How do we, I mean, how can these groups have a situation where everyone just gets on, everyone understands each individual's ideas about drag and queer identity?
I think they happen. Like, I think there's amazing nights that are like the Glory puts on a lot of nights. It's like a pub in East London. There are a lot of kind of discussions around this stuff happening, which is kind of why I wanted to normalize it, rather than like, there are so many great discussions happening that I wanted to put it in the film as kind of something which exists rather than it being the point of contention. It just exists.
Yeah.
Because I see that happening in my scene, but I also know that it's not necessarily happening in other places. It's not necessarily happening in other venues. And I think that we just have to kind of be more supportive of it and putting it out there and normalizing it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is your directorial debut. So how did you find your directing style? What's it like working with actors and actually having to be the one who is guiding them?
It's tough. Like because I have been kind of working in the industry for a number of years. So I've done lots of stuff that other people might kind of, like I've done development stuff. I've been doing production. I've done post-production, but directing is kind of a new set of skills that I was like, definitely where I was going to be cutting my teeth. I think finding the style is something that I am definitely still working on. I think probably always will be kind of fine-tuning it in that. I had amazing actors generally, though. Like, they were just brilliant people. I couldn't have asked for kind of a better lot. And everybody just had like total faith in my vision, like which was just so lovely.
Hugely validating.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely somebody who I think I can be fairly kind of like blunt and straight to the point. So then it's also the thing of learning how to get the best out of people. Because also it's not necessarily just, if there's stress on set, whether it's coming from me or coming from anybody else, if there's stress on set, it will throw performances. It will, and so it's just a case of it being my responsibility, not only for like me to ensure that I'm not bringing any stress, but also to ensure that if I feel like other people are bringing stress, to kind of have that discussion with them and kind of wanting to create a place where people just feel kind of comfortable to be able to do their job.
So it's a managerial role as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's kind of it's a managerial role. It's a creative role. You have to constantly be thinking about the edit. We did shoots over like a couple of weekends. Didn't get to do it in one go, which was its own challenge. And I felt really lucky that I just had amazing first ADs. Like, the first AD I worked with, Pradyusha, was a friend. And as the first AD I worked with, she was brilliant at kind of making me take a moment and be like thinking about how it's going to cut together and thinking about how performances will work. And then it's kind of, for me, I think being on set, what I realized is that the four most important, every role is important. Like, every role is like super important and everybody plays their part. But for the director, the kind of three other people that I feel like are essential to kind of working with is your DOP, which is obviously Beatrice is one of my best mates. I'm lucky enough to be, but also an incredible cinematographer. The first AD, because obviously they're kind of running the schedules, running the shoot, doing all of that, but they're also very, like, a good first AD is very focused on your edit. And then script supervisor, which is one of the most unsung roles on set, and they literally ensure that your film makes sense. So yeah.
So they are the ones that you lean on.
I think definitely. Like, I lean on them. I was lucky enough to have an amazing like makeup artist who was kind of, you know, I could give an inch and she ran a mile. My costume person was amazing, like, just in terms of kind of being very like DIY, which was kind of important to the aesthetic of the film in some ways. You know, she was sewing extra material into pieces and sewing jewels on. And my art department were just like brilliant, as you see in the film. It's kind of very nuanced in that. So I was lucky to kind of be able to have those creative discussions early on with people that I really felt like got it. So then on set, it was kind of basically the core team of kind of making sure that it would work for the edit, which is kind of the most important thing in my mind. So
how was the edit? How was actually sitting there and looking at your footage? Were you happy, or did you think, oh God, I've got no footage here. I'm so filled with dread.
So I've spent a lot of time in edits because that's what I do on big features and TV and stuff. So I knew what to expect. I have seen every director, no matter how nuanced in terms of the extremity of this, but go through that process of just being like, TV less so, because I think TV is more of a shared thing, that multiple directors and you're kind of doing that. But films, it's definitely like a kind of this is your vision, this is your baby. it didn't matter how much I prepared for that. I definitely went through it myself. Like it was just, it was proper hands in the head, just going, what have I done?
How long did it take to start molding all that clay and getting rid of the bits of jigsaw that you don't need, maybe bringing some back?
I think it took a while, but also I was working with, again, like a incredible editor who's also a very good friend of mine, and we're very good, I think, at having frank conversations. And I think she's also very good at dealing with me having that kind of like confidence crisis of being like, being able to kind of rip it to shreds, but also be able to put it back together when I'm like, oh no, we've taken too much out. Like it's definitely a process. But yeah, I think it took it's hard because also we're all doing this on the side. That's the beauty of short films.
Yeah.
If we had the money to basically be like, cool, we're going to book in 2 weeks, edit, great, get it out the door.
But surely doing it on the side gives you more time to come back with fresh eyes.
Do you know what? It's like, I feel really grateful for that. And it's something that I actually want to try and take into my future bigger projects, hopefully, because I see that happen a lot on features, and I see it happen a lot on TV, a burnout, where people are just like, they go straight from shoot into the cutting room, you got 6 weeks to get this out, and they can't see the wood for the trees. And so I think that I feel wary moving into my own projects, that I want to be like, look, I need to have a week off between the shoot, and I'd like to kind of space it out. It sucks for post schedules, but it is the best way to be able to come back to it with fresh eyes, like you say.
But even if you take, let's say, a week or two off, but then the editor is assembling an editor's first cut.
Yeah. Editors are really, I have a lot of love and respect for editors, because I think that, they can only do what they can with what they get given, but at the same time they can totally make a film. And I also think that I also know that they're one of the first ones to get fired if something's not working. So if the script hasn't quite been up to standard, and everyone's in the edit kind of going, we don't have what we need here, the editor's usually the one that gets the chop, and that's a really difficult position to be in. The editor is kind of, the therapist and the creative, and it's
When did you realize you were happy with the cut of Cindy?
I think I'd had some time away from it. Like, I think we'd done a cut and I was feeling good about it, but I was just like, it's quite burnt out. And so I had a couple of weeks kind of just to step away from it, not watch it, not think about it. And I came back and I was like, no, it's really good. I'm really happy. Yeah.
So you didn't shave off any bits here or there? You didn't?
We did, yeah. We cut a scene, which was sad, but it was also one of those things of it didn't work for the edit, but also we'd had to rush shooting it because we were about to get kicked out of our location. So I think it suffered, and I feel guilty because obviously that's like, for actors, that's like a scene that they really practice for and worked for, and that I get a lot of guilt around stuff like that when I'm like, people put in effort in terms of dressing this or acting in this scene, and then we have to cut it. I found that was one of the things in the edit that I was like, oh yeah.
But surely they understand you have to kill your darlings.
Yeah, I think that's, they definitely understand, and if they don't, they need to learn that. So. But no one kind of has said anything, because everyone's like genuinely such an amazingly positive response from cast and crew. Yeah, that would be the worst thing if someone came back and said like, what happened to that scene? Like,
but then you just have to have that managerial conversation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I didn't have to do that.
You have to be the big boss.
Yeah.
Cindy goes to visit her mum and her brothers, and that's where in the film you see the tension between the heteronormative environment that she comes from and the queer environment that she exists in. Is that taken from personal experience?
Not in sense of family. Like, I have an incredible mother who, I'm one of 7 kids, and I'm second youngest, and I think she thought she'd seen it all before she got to me, and then I kind of...
You were like, you ain't seen nothing yet, Mum.
I reinvented the wheel, but I'm very lucky that I can completely be myself with my family. There are a lot of us, so I think we're kind of all, fighting for attention sometimes and stuff. But no, I think I took that from... I took that from kind of other relationships in my family where it's kind of a thing of discussion around, you know, what you put out for the world. And like, you can kind of be yourself, but you just have to be careful about like what you put out for the world and how you are and stuff. And I also definitely have a lot of friends who have to navigate that constantly. Because I think now that there's more of a comfortableness around being queer, it's kind of them managing the like, you could like, we're happy for you. The shame isn't around queer, it's around kind of the public nature of kind of living a queer life. Because for me, queer is kind of not only your sexuality, but it's also your politics and your way of being. It's kind of against the heteronormative. So it's kind of, you know, being able to kind of be positive about polyamory, like really championing trans rights, all these kind of things that we're still not quite there yet in terms of people. It's kind of, yeah. So I wanted to reflect that.
Why do you think we're not there yet? Is it shame?
I think it's just a process. Like, I think it's just, these things take time and it's a generational thing. Like, it's a kind of a, you know, I've got lots of friends who are kind of looking forward to generations moving on in their families just because it's like the younger generations don't have the same kind of hang-ups around this stuff. And I think that the issue we have is that the older generations sometimes put these on to kind of the younger generations and they carry it with them as kind of like inherited trauma in some ways of kind of, you know, always in the back of your mind of how to act and how to behave and that. So, yeah.
It's the new counterculture.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's changing, and I think that's kind of what I'm hoping to achieve as a filmmaker, is to kind of just be constantly normalizing things and that, because I think that is how change happens. It's like if we kind of take the discussion around the negative discussion around it away and kind of present characters who are dealing with stuff, but it's more just kind of, it's more nuanced rather than it's like, oh, they're gay, like, oh, that's, yeah.
So you mentioned you're one of 7.
Yeah.
So let's go back. You grew up where?
I grew up on a cattle farm in New South Wales in Australia. Spent the first 11 years of my life there. And then I lived in Brisbane for my teenage years and Melbourne for first couple of years being an adult. And then I moved to the UK.
Because you ran out of places to live in Australia.
Everyone's like, where are you from? I'm like, the East Coast. Like, it's the easiest answer to give.
And you moved here specifically to be creative? Or what?
Yeah, I basically moved here because I was like, I think a lot of people have this thing where I was obsessed with films. Like, you know, I would, from the age of like 12, 13, I'd go to my Video Easy, which is like the Blockbuster equivalent, and I would rent like 7 films for the week. I'd watch them. I was just like that, but I never thought that I could work in film. And then I kind of...
When was that spark?
I think it was when I kind of hit a point where I was like, I need to get out of Australia. Australia's great. I had an amazing... I'm so lucky to have grown up there because my quality of life is like second to none. But I needed to see more of the world and I needed to kind of go exploring. And I think that when I kind of came to the thing that I was like, okay, I'm going to move to London, which I made a decision on like a 2-week notice. I was just like, right, I need to move. I'm going to go to London. Done. But I think once I made that decision, it was kind of almost like, Australia feels like there's not opportunities for something. So the minute that I was like in my head going to somewhere which was almost like the land of opportunities, I was like, okay, I actually want to pursue what I love doing, which is watching films. So I want to make them.
So what were the first steps? Because it's a big thing to go, oh, I love this VHS or DVD and I love the film. But then how do you go, oh, well, I'm going to go start making them? What are the steps?
I mean, I definitely, like, when I came to the UK, I was like, I want to make my own stuff. Like, I was like, I want to write, I want to direct, I want to produce. Like, I want to be making my own stuff. But I I also know that like I couldn't afford to go to film school, so I was like, okay, so I'm not going to be able to do that. So eventually I got a job in the industry as like a kind of like a producer's assistant.
In a production company?
Yeah, in like a tiny production company. Amazing people, but we were making like found footage, horror films and stuff like that. So it was like, and it was a very small one, so I got to do everything. Like I was kind of helping with business affairs stuff, development. Like they had 30 films on their slate, so I was doing a lot of stuff. And I remember I'd been there for about 2 weeks, and they were like, right, we need to do some pickups for this horror film that we've just shot. They gave me a budget. They were like, we need this particular kind of deer to be running in this particular kind of trees, with this particular kind of camera. I was like, cool, no worries. I drove a DOP from like Bristol out to like Surrey, and like was just driving around the UK and sorting this all out. And they came back, and I'd come under budget, and they were really like impressed. I was like, oh great. And I was like, I loved this, and I had such a good time doing it. And I just felt like after working in hospitality for like years, that I'd been able to take the skill set that I'd been working on and combine it with the thing that I love. And it was such a beautiful light bulb moment of kind of feeling like this was the case, and then suddenly being like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I'm so lucky to love what I do, because so many people I know, especially in kind of late 20s, early 30s, you start questioning what you're doing. And it doesn't matter how crap the job I'm on is. It doesn't matter how hard it is to get something funded. Like all of that, I still just am the biggest nerd for filmmaking. Like, and I love it. So yeah, very, very lucky.
So you've worked on some quite big productions. What did you do on Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here?
So I was post-production coordinator on that one. So basically I kind of work with the post-supervisor, which is a role I now do myself. And I basically, post-supervisor will do the budget for post, organize all the editor, oversee the grade, the visual effects, the sound. We fix everybody's problems in post, we like to say, because it's just like everybody on shoot will be like, I actually uttered that word on Cindy where I was like, we'll just fix it in post, it's fine. Which in post we kind of...
But did you know you could?
I did know we could.
If you're from that world, then you probably...
I did know we could, but it's still, even just saying that, because in post it's the most eye roll thing for someone to go, oh, we'll just fix it in post. But it's taught me a lot of kind of... Post has taught me not all the mistakes, but a lot of the mistakes that people make on shoot. And I think I've used it as my own training ground, basically. So I was working with Lynn.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, how close were you working with Lynn Ramsey?
I saw Lynn every day.
What did you learn from her? Because her films, like, we need to talk about Kevin, You Were Never Really Here.
Yeah.
She is phenomenal.
Lynn is like the most... I have had such a lucky experience to work with some incredible creative women. So Lynn is just the ultimate kind of, her heart and soul goes into filmmaking, and she is so on it. And, if she has a vision of how something should be and people aren't quite getting it, like, she will help them get there, but you have to have the faith, because she knows what she's doing. Like, she's just brilliant. It was like You Were Never Really Here was an insanely full-on film, and
it's intense.
It's an intense one, and it was also a big one for her, because I think it was her kind of, after having had a bit of a break, kind of coming back. And we were working on it. It went to Cannes, and there is such a nervousness about filmmaking where you're kind of like, you're delivering something and no one knows how it's going to be taken. Like, it doesn't matter how small or how big the film is, that nervousness is there. They went to Cannes, and everybody loved it at Cannes, and I just remember feeling like so happy for Lynn. And I've just gone through a very similar thing, because I've just been working on I May Destroy You with Michaela Cole, and it's like, to see somebody pour their life and soul into a project, and then to kind of have such an incredible response to it. Like, it's just so joyful. But yeah.
What do you take away from working with these female filmmakers who are operating at quite high levels in quite a male-dominated industry? Yeah,
I think it's interesting, because I think I definitely notice the language that's used around them is different from working with male filmmakers.
In what way?
Like, there's definitely kind of those conversations about people being difficult, or about people being kind of emotional, which which obviously like kind of being a little bit of a, especially when I was kind of coming up in my career and being a bit more of a wallflower in these conversations, they would say more openly in front of me. But I think that what I kind of take from them, like working with filmmakers in general, but particularly with female filmmakers, because I feel like their creativity gets questioned sometimes in a way that I don't necessarily see male creatives kind of being questioned. And I think what I take from them is really holding true to it, like that, like both Lynn and Michaela as examples are like people that they know what they want. They're not going to be kind of like they're also flexible. Like Michaela is like somebody who was so open to everyone's ideas and really wanting to, like, really big on collaboration.
Yeah.
But at the same time knowing what she wanted and knowing when to kind of dig in for it, and it shows, it pays off. Like you kind of, the proof is in the pudding. So yeah.
Have they seen your short?
Yeah, actually. So Michaela's seen my short. She's like, yeah, Michaela is such a champion of a person to everyone, and she was like, whatever you need, references wise, anything like that, which is the loveliest thing to kind of get from someone you're working with. But yeah, she's.
What about Lynn Ramsey?
Lynn is like last time I saw Lynn was at a screening for More Than Colour, which is one of her earlier films. If you haven't seen it, it is. Like I'd never seen it before and got to go see it when the BFI I think screened it for the first time in like 15 years or something. And Lynn was there because she was doing Q&A after, but she was also like hadn't seen it since it came out basically. And she was just in such good spirits because she hadn't, like, the last time I'd seen her before that was at the end of You Were Never Really Here. And so it's just like, also I think she puts a lot of effort into kind of recuperating after a film, because films are hard. Like films are hard work and they take it out of you. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is kind of pouring yourself in. If you're going to be a filmmaker that literally pours yourself in heart and soul, to also ensure that you take the time to kind of rest afterwards. And she just seemed in such good spirits. She was rested. She enjoyed the screening and was just like such a kind of joy to see that, because it was such a vastly different from the delivery of a film just kind of being like, I need to sleep. Like, yeah.
But has she seen Cindy?
No, she hasn't seen Cindy. No. She hasn't seen Cindy because I haven't seen her in probably like about a year and a half. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you could email it to her.
I could email it to her actually, but that's also the nervousness that comes of being like a filmmaker, of kind of wanting to push yourself but also not be annoying to people. I think that's the kind of navigation.
It's a hard balance to strike.
Definitely.
What's next for you? What's on the slate?
So I've got my own production company that I kind of like, which sounds way more impressive than it is. But I've been producing a couple of bits. I've just finished a short we produced called Love Is a Hand Grenade with Jessica Benhamu, who's amazing. But I am writing. I'm writing a lot at the moment. So I'm writing a couple of shorts that I've got already drafts of, that I'm kind of going through the editorial process. Was hoping to shoot them this year, but it's probably going to be more like next year. And then I'm, developing a feature idea and a TV idea at the moment, which is daunting to say the least, but it's so nice to be able to get all the ideas that constantly roll around in your head out and kind of see them take form and take shape. But I think what a lot of people have is kind of sitting down to do something. It doesn't matter how many TV scripts or film scripts you've read, sitting down to kind of tackle the beast yourself for the first time is intense. So yeah, but I'm enjoying it.
Is Cindy opening doors for you? Is it giving you the confidence to say, well, hang on, I can do this?
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of going through the process, like after kind of shooting it, I was like, it's the reinforcing, being like, okay, yeah, this is what I've wanted to do since I was a teenager, and always had very like complicated relationship to the confidence around that idea. So kind of getting to do the process of it, going, okay, yes, reminding myself this is actually what I want to do, and I enjoy it and I love it. The film kind of going out there, it is nerve-wracking as hell to start applying to festivals, because you're kind of like, will this film land? Will it kind of be taken positively? And for me, like, I think Melbourne Queer Film Festival was one of the first people that recognised it, and I'm so touched by that because obviously Australian Film Festival, there's a lot of secret homages into the film to kind of Priscilla Queen of the Desert and Muriel's Wedding and stuff like that. But then Iris Prize kind of acknowledging the film has been like a really huge tick of confidence to me, and I think that I'm also nervous about it going out on like kind of all four, just because it's the idea of literally everyone watching your film is kind of like, I hope it's well received. I hope nobody finds anything problematic. But I also, I'm hoping kind of off the back of this that like there will kind of be interest towards me, at least making some more shorts and hopefully some features. So
awesome. A couple of final questions. What advice can you give to anyone, young or old, who is wanting to get a creative life started or a filmmaking life?
I think the biggest advice that I hear a lot of people say is like, you've just got to go make films. And I think that's all kind of fine. But I think it's more complicated. Like people are like, just take your iPhone and make something. But I think it's a case of watching a lot of stuff and also, you know, trying to find people to work with who kind of have the same values as you and the same kind of like vision, and not going not going too big as your first dream, but at the same time not trying to limit yourself off the bat. Like don't like kind of be true to your creativity rather than kind of trying to constantly limit and edit yourself before you've even gotten there.
Okay. And I mean, my personal opinion is, as creatives, we all have that negative voice that says, you can't do this. So how do you actually deal with that in a, you know, when you sit down to write or you sit down to create? How do you silence that irritating voice?
What I am starting to learn is that voice is probably never going to go away. That's the thing. Like I think that's something that you kind of think, okay, I'll make my first film and that will kind of disappear. I definitely have a lot of problems with anxiety, particularly around that kind of thing. And I have sat at my desk looking at my computer screen for a long time with what I would call like very, very low key writer's block. Mm-hmm. I think it's in the moments when I'm not feeling at that kind of pivotal point that I really kind of have conversations with myself when I'm feeling good about myself, reminding myself to kind of carry that with me in those moments. I also have an incredible partner. Like my girlfriend is like the most supportive cheerleader that one could ask for in life. And I think that's a testament of like really surrounding yourself with people who kind of believe in you as a creative and support the idea of you being a creative. Like even if it's just in terms of affirmations and stuff, like kind of have a queer community that recognizes that you want to do something like that and kind of supports it in whatever way they can.
What's her name?
I'm probably not going to say her name on, so yeah.
Okay. But she's a keeper.
She's an absolute keeper, yeah.
Did you hear that? You're a keeper.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks for coming on. Did you enjoy yourself?
Yeah, I did. I was quite nervous, so yeah, it was good.
Well, it didn't show. So that's another episode of the Iris Prize 2020 podcast in the can. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and anywhere that you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. I've been Robert Gershinson. Please join us next time. See you later.